Good morning. Welcome to St. Luke's. I'm Reverend Michelle Manuel, and we're going to be continuing our wisdom series together. So, if you've been with us for the past few weeks and maybe the last more than few weeks, we've been in the wisdom books of the Old Testament. These books were thought to be written by King Solomon, and they were written in different parts of his life. So, wisdom from different ages and stages. And we started in what's called the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs, which was a little bit sensual. I hope you go back and listen to those sermons if you haven't already. But we talked about passion and how wise people are passionate, but passion is something to be used with caution and with wisdom, discernment. We also talked about praise, that wise people are those who are just passing out praise like it's their job, calling out the best in people. We then moved into the wisdom book of Ecclesiastes and we talked about satisfaction. And I think it was a true tragedy that our senior pastor did not end up singing I Can't Get No Satisfaction for our congregation, but here we are. We talked about the wise are not always looking for satisfaction. True satisfaction comes from Jesus Christ himself. And then we moved into the sermon on there is a time for everything. There are seasons. Last week, Reverend Montgomery Mears brought us into the book of Proverbs. And today we will be in Proverbs as well. She preached in the epilogue. So the first few verses of Proverbs was an introduction to what wisdom was, what wisdom is, and it's considered street smarts. Wisdom is not head knowledge, but it's something that you put on and what you wear around. We'll talk about that in today's sermon as well. But wisdom also centers in fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord is misunderstood. That's a misunderstood phrase. Doesn't mean we're cowering in terror at this punishing and angry God, but instead that we have come to know God in such a deep way that we revere God and we know that God is all powerful and has humanity's best interests at heart. So today we're moving right out of the epilogue or the prologue, excuse me, and we are moving into verse 8. So you've heard that read before now, but we're actually going to extend those verses on into 17, 18, and 19. So I'll read those later for us. But if you heard those first two verses, verses 8 and 9, you heard a very clear introduction to this entire passage. In fact, this passage is a pretty fun one to study because it has three distinct sections. And all the sections are started out with, my child. So we've moved out of this prologue into the teaching, and this is where the teaching and instruction begins from a father to his son. And it says here, hear my child, your father's instruction, and do not reject your mother's teaching, for they are a fair garland for your head and pendants for your neck. These two verses are something that we're going to carry with us, hopefully, throughout the rest of this series, but certainly as we look at the following two sections. This wisdom, first, is something that we learned in our upbringing. Most of us learned it in our home. That's what this passage is implying, that wisdom was given to us by our caretakers. And no, not all of us had perfect caretakers. In fact, not any of us had perfect caretakers, but we still gained life lessons and wisdom. And as we learned last week, wisdom is not knowledge. That's a very Hellenistic or a Greek way of thinking about wisdom. Instead, wisdom is something that we wear, that we put on. In fact, the Hebrew word for wisdom in the book of Proverbs is chokhmah. And that word wisdom is utilized in Exodus. It's only used in Exodus when referring to carpenters. This wisdom is a skill set. It's a box of tools that we carry around us and utilize in all areas of life. Wisdom is something that it's how we know how to handle situations that should be and could be baffling, but we carry this wisdom with us. It's not book smarts, it's street smarts, right? And this passage, in fact, describes it as something very important, a garland that you would wear on your head and a valuable pendant around your neck. So let's just think about that imagery. Wisdom is not something that's shoes. The author could have said, oh, these are shoes that will guide you where you'll go. Nope. The author could have used a belt. It's a girdle. It's going to uphold you and strengthen you for battle. It's not a sword. There's a lot of imagery that could have been used here, but instead it's a crown and a pendant, something that all will see, something that we lead with. We enter into the room with wisdom on the front of us, where everyone can view it. So wisdom is this skill set through which we enter into life. And today we're going to be talking about wisdom in friendships and wisdom in our relationships. And so because of what we've learned in our lives until now, we're putting on that wisdom. We're going to carry it into our lifestyle and into our friendships. Let's move into verses 10 through 14. Now, these verses are actually a gift to us. They get a little bit nasty, a little bit scary. There's some ulterior motives here. I'm going to read them again, and I want you to just kind of like cringe along with me at this language, okay? So, again, the second section begins with, my child, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us wantonly ambush the innocent. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down into the pit. We shall find all kinds of costly things. We shall fill our houses with booty. Throw in your lot among us, we'll have one purse. So this is obviously not the life we want to live. In fact, summed up, this could be say, let's get rich off the backs of the innocent, the people they have deemed innocent. Let's ambush them. Let's surprise them and take all that they have. Oh, and you can get rich with us. This is, we'll have the same purse. We'll all split the profits. It's not too far from kind of a worldview that we might experience today. But friends, this type of statement is a gift to us. Because when we're wearing wisdom like a crown and like a pendant around our neck, allowing it to inform us and lead us in life, we can see right through this. And we can see, oh, that's not the way I want to live. But when someone says something this direct to you, when someone tells you their goals, their dreams, their ambitions, it's a gift. And I hope you don't judge them for it, because here is a statement that is probably coming from a place of, I want security. I want to be safe. I want to provide for my family. And I've come to a place of desperation that I'm willing to do that by any means possible, right? So when someone's this blatant with us, then we are able to see their motivations in life. We're able to see their values. This is a values statement, and that's honest, and that's good. So when we think about values, though, have we ourselves, it's easy to kind of judge the values of others, but have we ourselves assessed our own values? And no, maybe this type of thing is not spewing out of our mouth, and we're certainly not espousing this as a way for our children to learn how to be in the world. But have we actually sat down and assessed what we believe? Because if we're not intentional, we can actually lean into a worldview and without our knowing, absorb this set of values that somehow success is defined by financial gain at the expense of others, right? That dog eat dog world. Anyone who gets in my way will just move them out of the way. So, values is something we want to be very clear about and very intentional. In fact, in my last pastoral appointment, I got to hear a speaker named Dr. Madeline Levine. She is a practicing psychologist, has done research for over 25 years, and specializes in working with adolescents. And she has found herself in the field of working with adolescents from the upper socioeconomic status. This is some of our people, right? And she offers so much grace and not judgment in how to better the mental health of our adolescents. In fact, she has found that the new at risk category is kids and teenagers from these higher socioeconomic status households, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, substance abuse, depression, even suicide. These things are showing up at an alarming rate. And so she asks herself why. And in her research, she focuses in on a few key things. And one of those things is values. So we actually are influenced by our surroundings a lot more than we want to admit. Have you ever traveled abroad? I mean, not just traveled, but maybe stayed somewhere in one place for some time? You really do start to take on the customs and the behaviors and the social norms um, without knowing it. And so we're influenced by a worldview that says material gain is the best and no, like the humble life is not necessarily the best, right? So we want to think about our values, and our values need to align with our behaviors. Dr. Madeline Levine says that households in this higher socioeconomic status homes, they actually, the parents, when they are interviewed, they say, we want good things for our kids. We want them to be successful in life. And she says, okay, define success. And they will say things like, we want them to be fulfilled and to find their purpose and calling in life. We want them to find love and belonging. We want them to prosper in certain ways. And not one parent out of all of her research mentioned finances. They didn't mention material gain. There was one couple who dared to mention we'd love for them to get off the payroll at some point. She was grateful for that honesty. But parents really aren't thinking in terms of values about financial success. Now, the kids, when those kids of those parents are interviewed, they think that Dr. Levine has been snowed, that she's had the wool pulled over her eyes, because the kids, when they say how they would define success and how they believe their parents would define success, has everything to do with financial success, getting into a good college, getting into a good job, having a career path, and in finance or whatever that is prosperous. And so the kids there's a disconnect. There's a deep misunderstanding. And because it's not talked about in a clear and intentional way, the kids are pressured. And it's kind of their own doing, but it's also can be remedied in a simple conversation that is returned to over and over again. Values. We want our values to be what we wear as our wisdom on our head, a garland of wisdom, a pendant around our neck. And we want to carry that into our home because we'll carry those things out into the world. And instead of being influenced by a worldview that says, we're going to do what we want and we don't care who gets hurt, instead, we'll move forward and say, we're going to live differently here. Because if we actually look at the final statement in verse 19, it says, such is the end of all who are greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. Any of us know that chasing down the road for things that are empty, that don't actually bring fulfillment, really only brings death. The third and final section of instruction says, "My child, do not walk in this way. Keep your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil and they hurry to shed blood. For vain is the net baited while the bird is looking on. Yet they lie in wait to kill themselves. They set an ambush for their own lives." The wisdom that we've been granted in living the Christian life long term is that we know where life and life abundant is, and it's not at the sake or the expense of others. And it's not to climb a ladder or a social ladder, right? In fact, fulfillment comes from the life that Jesus gives us. So when we bring wisdom into this realm of making friends and influencing people, we want to do just that. We want to be an influence. The teenagers in the room understand hashtag influencers, right? It's a whole lifestyle now. And so, what we want to do is take this wisdom and take this passage and not say, oh, we don't hang out with sinners, we don't hang out with broken people, we don't associate ourselves with people who are about the wrong things. That's an oversimplification of this passage. Instead, when we have our garland and our pendant of wisdom on, we can move into a space that is more like Jesus. Because how might one reconcile a passage that says, don't do what sinners do, don't go with sinners, don't be with sinners? How would we reconcile that when we look to our Jesus who regularly ate in the company of sex workers, of tax collectors who were getting rich off the backs of the innocent? How are we to reconcile that Jesus called the ones who would take his legacy into the future were simple fishermen, right? And shepherds. What? We can reconcile this because grace and wisdom go hand in hand. And when we know who we are, when we know what we're about, and we wear our wisdom into the world, then death loses its sting. The consequences of poor decisions can be turned into riches and beauty. And we can be Jesus for a world who so needs that influence. Friends, always lead with wisdom, always lead with grace, and wear it around. Let it lead you. Let's pray together. Gracious and loving God, we are thankful for your grace, for your mercy, and for your abundant life. Lord, thank you for bringing us this word, and thank you for bringing us into situations that our wisdom and your guidance can handle. God, continue to guide us. May we love all just as you have loved us. Amen.